Hello and welcome to episode 123 of Retro Encounter, RPG fans' topic-specific podcast not attached to current events. My name's Mike Sollosi. I'm your host today, and I'm here with two dog lovers and celebrants of the Year of the Dog. First, starting with Caitlin Argyros.
Hi guys, thank you for all on the board. Happy to return to Retro at last.
Yeah, it's been a minute since we've had you, Caitlin. It's not since the Final Fantasy XII episodes, am I right?
Yeah, it's been too long.
It's always too long. And joining Caitlin and I is Hilary Andreff.
Hi, good to be here.
We're here for a very special episode. We didn't play a game just for this episode, but there is a game that we're going to be talking about. For followers of the Lunar calendar, you may know that in the Chinese New Year, the Year of the Dog began a few days ago on February the 16th. So, what game celebrates both dogs and the Lunar New Year and all the animals of the Lunar New Year in the Chinese calendar, then Okami, the PS2 classic that has been remade for at least 3 other systems. Maybe I'm counting one. Okay, so it's PS2, Wii, PS3, PC, PS4, and Xbox. So there's been 6 different re-releases, 1 initial release in the PS2 and 5 re-releases of Okami over the years. And I think it's would you call it an unassailable classic, or just a really good PS2 game, or...
I'd say it's a classic.
All right.
I would too.
I unfortunately didn't play Okami until its PS3 release. I bought it on PS2, but didn't even touch it. And I think I was half off on PS3 once, and I played it enthusiastically in the 2011-2012 range, and had a lot of fun with it. Caitlin, were you in Okami on the ground floor, or did you play a little later?
Oh, I was in there. I was in Okami fandom before the game even came out, actually.
All right.
So I got introduced to the game when I saw the TGS, I believe it was 2004 trailer, and this was just a little demonstration of Ami running around fighting enemies, and it was set to what we would later find out is the classic Shinshu Fields theme. And I immediately fell in love with it. The art style was gorgeous. It just looked beautiful and sounded great. But I wasn't, at the time, I thought, I don't know if this game's going to come out. It's so Japanese. I don't know if Capcom is going to see, to think that it's going to do well outside of Japan. So when we got it, I was super ecstatic about it. I was so happy to play it, and I actually had imported it previously in Japanese and had been slowly working my way through all of the copious amounts of text, because the game has a lot of dialogue, and was working through that. Then I bought it in English. I absolutely loved it. It was everything that I thought it was going to be and more, and I've been super happy to see that it has done well enough to see several ports and a DS sequel sequel in Okami Den. So I've been a dog fan, at least a fan of this particular canine for quite some time.
Right, and if memory serves, Caitlin, you wrote a review of the either the PS4 or the PC version of Okami a few months ago, right near the end of 2017, and I think I saw you on the RPG Fan Twitch channel playing or replaying that version earlier this year. Am I correct in remembering that?
On both accounts, yes.
Yes, okay, right.
I had the great honor to review the PS4 remastered. It's basically the same remastered version as the PS3, but it came to PS4, PC, and Xbox at the end of 2017. Got to review that, and I have been streaming the game on PC. So, yes.
I see, okay. And we should mention this a little bit before I ask Hilary about her personal experience with Okami. RPG Fan didn't cover the initial PS2 release or its re-releases on the Wii or PS3, and that's because there's the whole is it or isn't an RPG discussion that I kind of hate having. But because I mean, my personal feeling is if we think readers would be interested, and if there are staff that are interested in writing about it, then we might as well review and or talk about it. Because there was enough, uncertainty about Okami's RPG status, it was not reviewed in those first few incarnations. But I guess the current leadership of RPG Fan, or at least the leadership for most of 2017, was interested in covering it a little bit, so we decided to finally let someone review it, and that someone was Caitlin. And listener, if you think Okami is an RPG or isn't an RPG, or if that definition matters, that's fine. We don't care. It's on the site, and it's on Retro Encounter. So there we go. Now, Hilary, same question to you. Like, what's your when did you first start playing Okami, and what are your general thoughts about it?
Let's see. Well, I first saw it because of a college friend's little sister, actually. She started playing it, and it was one of those games that I sort of saw her playing, really wanted to see more, really wanted to play it myself, but the timing was just not good. Didn't have access to it for a while, so I ended up playing the PS2 version probably like a few years after it was released, actually. And haven't been back to it for quite a while, but with all these re-releases, I'm excited to play it again. I recently started, so.
Awesome. I mentioned this before, I guess, a little bit, but I thought it was beautiful and interesting and fascinating for the first moment I saw it, and especially being a bit of a Capcom fanboy, I was interested in playing it. But I don't know exactly what got in the way. I mean, I was in college when it came out, and I followed its coverage. I was interested in playing it, but it just didn't happen for me. I think it's because I was extremely busy my last 2 years of college, and I didn't. I just, a lot of my PS2 collection got left in the dust a little bit. But when I did end up playing it on the HD version on PS3, I thought it was outstanding. It's probably my favorite 3D Zelda game, even though it doesn't technically have that word on the cover. But it's so uniquely stylized, and the gameplay is satisfying, and the story is really interesting, I think. Now, on the surface, perhaps obviously, it incorporates a lot of classic stories from Japanese folklore. I mean, you have the Susanoo Orochi tale that is sort of represented in the, I guess, the first chapter or two of the game, and towards the end when there's a sort of reprise Orochi fight, and then there's an evil trickster fox middle chapter, and then they incorporate some, I think, like some Ainu lore in the Kamui area of the game, because like Ainu are an indigenous Japanese people of Hokkaido, and and Kamui is an Ainu god, and the Kamui area is basically a frozen Hokkaido-ish area. But also it has a sort of a really clever, funny script. Susanoo is a complete goofball, and there's a surprising amount of humor, both visual and written humor, throughout Okami. So, Hilary, what are your thoughts on how they incorporate the folklore, and what do you remember about the story and script of the game?
So one of the very first things I remember is actually Ami's posture when other characters are talking. I think of that first when I sort of think of like the humor of this game. I mean, she's very much acting like a typical dog. She falls asleep sometimes. She kind of growls a little bit, sniffs, all that fun stuff. And that kind of left a lasting impression. I love that.
She has a lot of dog-like mannerisms. I wonder if they if they had some very confused dog do motion capture for the animators or something. But I totally agree. And anything else?
Just how lively all the characters are, honestly. Like, it was just an absolute treat to see the way all these different stories kind of came together and how they put them all together into a larger overarching story. I think it made it something similar, celebratory, but also a little bit different.
Right. And Caitlin, you played this very recently. What are your thoughts on sort of the game's script and how it holds up?
Well, I think, just from a writing standpoint, it's excellent. Characters really come through in the writing. Isun being your talking piece has a lot of personality. The whole, if we're going with the Zelda analogies, Isun is your Navi.
He's a much better and much more charming version of Navi.
Yeah, he's not nearly. He's annoying, but he's annoying in a way that makes you love him. Whereas Navi was just kind of annoying, and you're like, shut up, Navi.
And he's chatty, but not chatty the way Navi is.
Yeah. But I mean, not just Isun, but all of the characters really shine in their writing, and it's great to see the humor come through, not just in the writing, but also in the animation. Most of the brush gods that you meet have a funny little quirk to their animation, whether it's like, say, Bakugami, it's the the boar or the pig god rolling on a giant bomb, and his little baby,
his little hoglets following him behind,
trying to blow him up. Yeah.
Oh my gosh, I forgot about that.
Yeah, most of the brush gods have that little humor to them. Some of them are straight, but a lot of them just have a little kind of fun to them, and that was always a treat. I'm gonna say this in advance. I do not remember any of their names other than Amaterasu. So I'm going to be identifying them by their animals or by their powers, because there's 16 of them, and they're all something Gami. It's a lost cause. I'm not going to remember them by their real names. Yeah, it's hard. I only remember a few off the top of my head too, so don't worry about it. But no, I think one of the things that I love the most about the game is, like you mentioned, how it brings in those references to Japanese folklore, mythology, and does it in really interesting and cool ways. I mean, it's not, you have the characters and they do sort of somewhat tell their stories. Like you have Susanoo fighting off Orochi to save Kushi, which is part of the myth surrounding them. You've got the tale of the bamboo cutter, and Kaguya being this moon child who has to return to her homeland. That's part of the myth surrounding her too.
And there's also the fisherman and the turtle, because you visit the Ryukyu kingdom and meet the queen there.
Mm-hmm.
For something, and that's part of the fisherman and the turtle story. There's a lot of Japanese folklore and fairy tales that are not part of the common Western lexicon. So there's probably a dozen references that I didn't understand when I played Okami 5 or 6 years ago, or whenever I did. And I'm an enthusiast of myth and folklore who knows more than the average person about the myths of different cultures. So but it was cool seeing it represented in such an interesting way. And all the brush gods you mentioned, they're all animals within the Chinese zodiac, except for the cat, which is in some different versions of the lunar calendar. I think it's either the Vietnamese or the Thai version of that lunar calendar has the cat instead of the rabbit. But lots of little cool stories like that are sneak into Okami in cool ways, and they're represented by these brush gods who give Ami all of her powers that she uses throughout the game. If this was using the Zelda comparison, all of Zelda's skills and spells and tools that he uses are basically the brush gods in Okami. Caitlin, do you have a particular favorite? I mean, you mentioned the pig with the bomb powers.
Well, let's see. Just in terms of the antics that they get into.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm gonna blank on names here, of course, but the god that gives you your moon power, which is the rabbit that's pounding mochi. Was so random and cute that they're like pounding mochi, and then he's like, Ami, you're doing it wrong, and goes kind of ham on her. I think if I'm remembering her name, Nuegami, the snake that's trapped in a little bottle and can't get out, gives you the water spout ability. Was super cute. Gosh, it's really hard to remember off the top of my head. All of the flora gods, the Hanugami,
the three monkeys that have different blossoming and sprouting plant powers.
Yeah, mm-hmm. they were all very fun. The first one was mostly straight, but the second two got really funky with like trying to catch their symbols and things like that. So it's a lot of fun. And I mean, like, that's entirely separate from the abilities themselves, which are also really useful and fun to work with. But just, it was nice to see that humor added in, because it's the same basic sequence every time you meet them. They just say, "Oh, great mother Okami, mother to us all, we long have I slumbered and hid from the world, and now you've awakened me. You please use my power to,"
and it like cuts off to sort of like a heavenly kind of setting, and all of the animals, including Amaterasu, are sort of these stylized white and red versions of their animal forms. But I mean, like both of you have said, they have a lot of sort of physical mannerisms and antics that make them very cute and amusing, and sometimes intimidating. Like the tiger one that has a large bow and arrow and gives you lightning powers is kind of scary and almost has like a stare down with Ami for a minute. Yep. But like you can tell that they're friendly. They're your buddy gods, and they're really cool designs. And I guess each of them also have a sort of item or implement. Am I remembering that correctly? Yeah, I thought so.
Usually. Yeah, pretty much.
So each of them is an animal. Each of them has a god and a power which is like an element or some special skill, and they all have a little tool that they use. So, like, you have a tiger with a big bow and arrow, and a mouse with a big sword, and
I was just about to mention that.
Right, and an ox with like a big hunting horn or something. So it's a really cool collection, and every time you meet one, it feels really important and impactful. And so Hilary, did you have a favorite?
The mouse / rat with the sword is always adorable.
Tachigami.
Yes.
Yeah, I've already given up on trying to remember their names. Like, nope, sorry.
As someone who's a huge fan of games like ActRaiser, where you kind of go around restoring the land, the land restoring trio was probably also my other favorite. I just really like going around and making things pretty again.
Blossom is just so much fun.
Yeah.
And we should mention maybe one of the defining gameplay gimmicks of Okami is you sort of to use the god powers, you use a celestial brush to draw symbols or directions or basic commands to activate all of these powers. And they're even called brush gods, which I think Caitlin probably mentioned already. Mm-hmm. But so the powers that you get from these are pretty persistent. One complaint I have about Zelda games sometimes is that the item that you get in a dungeon that, sort of, assists the defining gimmick of the dungeon, sometimes those weapons are mostly forgotten outside that dungeon, or have maybe one puzzle outside that dungeon. Like, the ultimate example, I think, is the spinner item in Legend of Zelda Twilight Princess, which I don't think you ever need to use outside that desert dungeon where you get it. But Okami's not like that. Whenever you get a new brush god power, you will probably need to use it soon after you get it, but throughout the world, you will still be using the brush powers that you got in the very beginning of the game. They're very persistent and very versatile.
Yeah, and getting them and then in some cases powering them up gives you access to other areas, lets you get items that you couldn't previously receive, and just allows you to explore more of the world. It makes backtracking, which you do have to do a couple times throughout the game, if you don't want to fast travel skip, it makes it rewarding to go back to those areas once you've gotten a new skill. Being able to dig through hard rock lets you find more things. When you upgrade Power Slash, you can break stone and later on harder materials to get things. So it rewards you. It makes it rewarding to backtrack, which is that's something a lot of games don't necessarily do very well. They make backtracking tedious and just about getting from point A to point B instead of giving you more tools to make that point A to point B interesting.
Yeah, and these are dense stages to revisit. This isn't a big empty Hyrule field. There's a lot going on in every setting of the game.
Mm-hmm. And it really feels like you're exploring.
Yes, it does.
Agreed. Let's see. Where do we want to go from here? About how those brush powers work. Did you? Now I played that on a PS3 controller. Caitlin, have you also played the Wii version of this game?
I have, and personally, I found that brush techniques didn't work as well
Okay.
using motion controls.
Yeah, you were able to, put two and two together and see where I was trying to direct this this topic.
Yeah, it's really ironic because you would think, oh, this is the perfect game for the Wii with motion controls. It should be fun to paint using the Wiimote to move, but actually, it really wasn't. And ironically, or not ironically, but rather similarly, I've had kind of the same experience on PC when I've tried to use the keyboard and mouse, using the mouse to brush. It works, but it doesn't flow quite as well. It doesn't look as nice as using the analog stick, because the mouse is just that much more accurate. So it's able to more accurately represent how horrible I am at drawing. And sometimes that means that I screw up a brush technique and it doesn't do what I want it to do. So it's one of those weird situations where, yeah, I think I ultimately prefer using analog sticks to control the brush techniques.
That's interesting to me because I haven't played the PC or Wii versions, but I do remember one of my friends telling me, I think it was someone in the gaming club in college, that the Wii version of Okami seems like it should be perfect, but it isn't perfect, and that makes it kind of frustrating. The example he used was one area I remember being a little challenging. There's a segment where you're sort of going down a raft down a raging river, and to save yourself, you use the one of the growth powers from the monkeys to tie vines to the end between your raft and the and the shoreline, or to trees on the shoreline. Please correct me if I'm misremembering this.
Yeah.
So you're basically just creating vines to hold your raft in place, and to do that you have to do fairly tight circular brush strokes, and then drag them out to the outside. So doing activities like tight circles and then lines following them seems like it would be easier on a Wiimote or on a mouse instead of a PS3 controller. And I remember that scene was a little challenging on the PS3, but it seemed to me that it would be easier on the Wii, and my friend in the gaming club insisted that it was worse. So you're replaying it on the PC now, so do the more complicated brushstroke techniques, are they at all easier, or do you think it's just straight up better with the PlayStation controllers?
Oh, well, actually, when I've been playing it on PC, I've been using a controller.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. For various reasons, some including the fact that that's how I'm using my my mic, and my headset is plugged into my controller. But yeah, in general, part of it is vanity. I cannot get brushstrokes to look as nice with a mouse as they do on a controller. It's something to do with the engine that they're using to allow the analog stick. I'm sure there's some correction involved to make it look nice and smooth. It looks better, so part of me doesn't want to do it on the mouse. But yeah, it is sometimes, you would expect it to be better because you have more precise control with the mouse than you do with an analog stick, but that doesn't always translate. It's the same thing if you try to draw in paint using a mouse, you can make really great things, and there are people that can do that, but your average person trying to draw a picture in paint using a mouse, it's probably going to look stiff and kind of crappy because it's just not the ideal sort of medium to be doing that kind of work. You need to be using a pen-like thing in order to, or a pencil-like implement to really get the precise sort of strokes that you want. And this is a similar thing, I think, with Okami. Is just that it works. It's not that it's not functional, and certainly if I played using the mouse more, I'd probably get used to the preciseness, and maybe I wouldn't run into situations where I'm trying to draw the bomb, and for whatever reason I don't get the circle all the way done, so it doesn't go off. But it's an adjustment. Let's say if you've ever played the game on a console, going to that kind of control, it's an adjustment, and sometimes it ends up screwing you a little bit.
It's funny you should mention kind of that vanity part, because I remember getting frustrated even on a single platform when my brush techniques didn't look as nice as I wanted them to, or they didn't work.
I
It
don't.
makes sense. Ami is this great, brush artist. I mean, even Isun from the very get go is like, "Holy crap, you're amazing! You're better than me. I'm gonna stick around and like mooch off your skill." And then like you create this crappy looking thing. It's like, no one saw that, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, Ami is beautiful and graceful, so naturally her artwork should be beautiful and graceful, and not this, like lame attempt at drawing a diagonal line that is somehow a circle. But so it takes the brush controls take getting used to, but once you have maybe half of the skills in the game and can reliably pull them off, you really feel like a badass, because it's a pretty unique mechanic that I think is implemented excellently from my one time playing the game. But I mean, speaking of art, I think maybe we've even been not we haven't talked about it enough yet. The game's art style is astounding.
Yes.
It is stunning. It's influenced by traditional Japanese art. Like everything in the world looks like it's composed of brush strokes. The colors are really bold. It is one of the prettiest games of that era, and I think its visual its style and its beauty has held up. Like I remember seeing screens from the HD version and checking out Caitlin's stream at one time. It's like, oh wow, this still looks better than 2017 games.
Yes, it's this is one of those examples of how art design can trump pure graphics power, and how even a heavily stylized game can look beautiful, even more beautiful than games that try to do hyper realistic graphics. So by all means, developers keep doing that. Keep having that sort of heavily stylized art design first mentality, because Okami shows that it really does work and it really does hold up over because this game is over 10 years old and it still looks freaking gorgeous. So
yeah. And it's we've mentioned it's been remade into HD several times, and basically when a remake is able to have a game look good on modern televisions while still preserving the art that made that game look beautiful in the first place, then the result is a triumph. I think it hasn't been out for very long, but the remake of Shadow of the Colossus is a similar thing. Like, that game looks beautiful. They had to just make adjustments so that it would still look good on modern systems and modern televisions. And when that remake is done thoroughly and faithfully, a beautiful game looks maybe even better. And it's I'm glad that none of those remakes seem to ruin Okami, because it's really one of the most memorably pretty games I've ever played.
yeah, definitely. And I mean, just talking about like the art design, even we were talking about how the game has all these references to mythology and folklore. They even throw that stuff into the art design and and the design of the characters, which is amazing. Like Kushi, the sake brewer from Kamiki Village, her full name is Kushinada, and that's an actual mythological figure. The myth is that her family's being plagued by the demon Orochi, and Susanoo saves her by transforming her into a comb. And you see that in the game because her hair looks like a comb, like one of those flat, combs that you might see from time to like think the comb from like Titanic. Remember that fancy little comb, the butterfly comb, that kind of comb. And her hair looks like that. And that was just a really cool little design element. It has nothing to do with the story, because the story in the game doesn't actually touch on that any beyond simply having Susanoo save her and their names. But it was a really nice little Easter egg for people that are familiar with the mythology. And that's just, it's one of many different little touches that they have throwing into the character design and the way that the game is drawn for you. So it's just so good.
Yeah, and they're really consistent with those touches too. Just everything comes together in a really breathtaking whole picture. Like, it's just so consistently just pleasing aesthetically.
Right, and now, unfortunately, I probably should have refreshed myself better on this, but the music in Okami also reflects Japanese culture and folklore with a lot of traditional instrumentation, even though it's definitely a video game soundtrack that has its it's sort of more battle tracks and it's and versus village or peaceful tracks. And Caitlin, I know you're a major enthusiast of video game music. So what are your thoughts on on Okami's soundtrack?
It's excellent, and everyone should listen to it.
Okay, all right, that was easy.
No, yeah, it's a great soundtrack, and like you said, it implements a lot of traditional Japanese instruments, things like shamisen, koto. Even you've got some vocalizations that are very.
I'm a particular fan of. I'm especially being a member of Drumlines for many years. There's a lot of underlying taiko in especially in the battle tracks that I always enjoy.
Yeah.
If I can hear like the rumble of a big standing taiko drum, it's like, oh yeah, we're about to get into some shit.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Like the basic battle theme is mostly just. There's some instrumentation, but it's a lot of percussion too, and it fits the game perfectly, being this, really, Japanese game with lots of Japanese mythology and lore and even the art style looking like traditional Japanese artwork. So it's fitting to have that sort of, traditional Japanese instrumentation as well. But, it's never done in a way that I think is inaccessible to people who have not listened to traditional Japanese music. It's still insanely catchy. It's mostly instrumentation choices that are there to increase the flavor of the music and fit the scene. But there are pieces like I mentioned, Shinshu Fields is one of those classic pieces. The final boss theme, The Sun Rises, is still one of the absolute best final boss themes I've ever heard. So there's just so much to love, and I love that they did that they implemented traditional Japanese instruments, but they kept it relatable to modern audiences, because even in Japan, I'm sure there are a lot of people who aren't really super into traditional Japanese music. I'm not saying that all of them are, of course, but just like here, in the West, not all of us are into classical, super, old classical music. So it's great that they could blend the two and make it fit the game, but also just really work very well.
You're right, and I apologize if listeners just accidentally got a computer update noise go through the audio. That's my bad. But you're absolutely right. It's remarkable how they were able to use traditional Japanese sounds and instrumentation, but also still have it, be a video game soundtrack with setting the right tones and tempos for different parts of the game. And I don't particularly remember the final boss theme, but if you insist that it's banging, then I'll take your word for it. I might have to check it out on my own time now.
It's banging.
All right, confirmed banging.
I actually have one last music-related question. Has anyone had a chance to listen to the 5 Tones of Okami? It's kind of a different version of the soundtrack. It's sort of a stripped-down version with some Western strings and I think shakuhachi flute and shamisen.
I have not, which is horrible, and I'm a bad person.
Okay, well, I have not heard of that, but I did some very quick background Googling, and we do have a review of that soundtrack that it looks like it was less than a year ago we posted it, but that album came out in 2012.
Yeah, I actually started listening to it because of that review, and
you must have proofread it, didn't you? Mm-hmm. That's it. Okay, I see now. All right.
But I'm mentioning it quickly because it shows how well some of the music holds up, even in a slightly different form. It's still wonderful to listen to. So
yeah. There was a jazz album that I reviewed a couple years back that was similarly, totally different instruments. There's no sax and just like that. There's no sax in the Okami soundtrack, but it still held up even using different instrumentation.
Awesome. Okay, so those are 2 very cool albums that we have reviews on RPGFan.com for listeners. So listeners that are maybe you aren't familiar with our music reviews, but all of our soundtrack reviews have sample tracks of I think it might be 30 seconds, might be a minute for each of those tracks. But you can very, very easily listen to sound samples for any of our soundtrack reviews just from a side menu. And I have not listened to those albums in detail. I'm not always good about reading every music review that we put out, unfortunately. Sorry, Marcos, but yeah, definitely check those out because I think I will immediately after this podcast is over. There's one complaint about Okami that I hear often. So, the runtime of Okami is probably around 40 hours. It's lengthy for an action game, not lengthy for a big RPG, but like it's a dense, long game, which is I think mostly to its credit, but also sometimes I mean you know how. Attention spans and focus can falter if a game feels like it's outstaying its welcome, or is a little, or would be better if it was a little shorter. So, I know that Rob Steinman has mentioned multiple times on Random Encounter that he has gotten to Kamui, the sort of third act out of 3.5 of Okami. He's gotten to Kamui 2 or 3 times, but all of those times he ended up stopped playing it because he just ran out of steam. So,
which is horrible because that's like there's not much left once you get to Kamui. Kamui itself isn't very long.
Yeah, it's shorter than the first 2 segments of the game, to my memory. And I should mention, I have only played the game once, but I did finish it the one time I committed to playing it. But and it was I think it was 2011 or 2012. But so, Caitlin, now I know I'm pretty sure that you're going to say no, this game is not too long. But what are your thoughts on the game's sort of length and on maybe a player running out of patience or focus? Like, do you think that's a valid criticism, or do you think that just it does everything just right?
I mean,
sorry for putting you on the spot.
Personally, the length doesn't bother me. If someone else thinks it's too long, I mean, everyone has their own different levels of attention and patience, and you're right. It's an action game. It's not a traditional RPG where maybe the length would be more expected. But I don't know. I do feel like because it's shorter, the Kamui arc isn't as developed as the Orochi and Ninetales arcs are, and that can be a little problematic. You can sort of feel the game a little bit running out of steam there, just because they don't give enough time to really develop the story of the characters. There, they don't get as much as screen time as perhaps they should have, although that would have made it longer. So, but when I sit down and I think about it, I find myself not necessarily sure how they could have made it shorter because, right. Mm-hmm. I mean, the game would have been too short if it ended after Orochi or Ninetales. Especially, it can't end after Ninetales because Ninetales explicitly tells you that its boss, the Lord of Darkness, is out there. You can't end a game like that.
Right. I love the Ninetales arc. I think it's maybe the most exciting part of the game, especially since it has a bit of a cool twist near the end of it. But yeah. But I mean, Ninetales is 100% an interim boss. Like the game would have felt unfinished if Ninetales was the end, or even if it was Ninetales and then an Orochi reprise and that was the end. And so, piggybacking off of your comments, if the game's too long, then what are we supposed to cut? The story would feel unfinished if you cut any of the major segments, and the world wouldn't feel as rich or as lush if you provided fewer things for the player to do. And
like side quests and stuff like that.
Yeah, like side quests and hidden items, and like I mean, I understand if you think there's too many damn beads to collect. I think that is.
I never do that.
Yeah, right. Yeah. Some people have that collector instinct, and some people don't, and I understand. And for me, it depends on game to game whether I collect everything. But there's a lot to do in Okami. There is some backtracking, which is unfortunate because I don't think anyone really loves backtracking. But it's long, but I think it justifies its plot points and the density of its world. So I admit I was sort of ready for the game to end when I was an hour 40 and near the end of the game. But saying a game is too long or it outstays its welcome usually means there's something unpleasant or bad or badly designed about something in the second half, and I don't think that's true of Okami. I agree that it's long for an action game, and I understand if people get fatigue on it, but it's really awesome.
You both bring up really, really interesting points because fatigue can happen for so many different reasons. It could be closely tied to the expectation that these types of games are usually shorter. It could be because that third act, you're used to this really, really rich story. And if the third act doesn't have quite as much of that, that could actually also maybe be a source. So, it's hard to say exactly why, and some people will feel it and some won't.
It's the one thing though that when people harp on the game, that's what they usually harp on is, oh, that game was so long. And I mean, it's a 40-hour game, but like I play a ton of RPGs that I spend way more time on. I have 120 plus hours in Xenoblade 2 right now, and I still have a couple chapters before the end of the game.
I played Persona 5 twice in 2017, and that game is 90 hours. So if I complain that a game is too long, I'm basically a hypocrite every time.
Yeah. So, I mean, but it is, to be fair, it's not a traditional RPG. We're stretching the definition of RPG to include it again, because it's a Zelda game and we cover Zelda. So I think, Hilary, I think you're right about expectations because of the type of game that it is. People look at a game like this and they expect it to be shorter because I feel like, traditional RPGs, they expect length because RPGs are all about stories and battle sequences that take time. And Okami, while it has a long story, it doesn't feel necessarily like a traditional RPG with, you don't have a party with different characters and you don't have long turn-based battles. The battles are actually really short outside of boss battles. Mm-hmm. So yeah, maybe the expectation is, well, this should be shorter because it's clearly an action game, and action games are usually somewhere in the 25 to 30 hour range instead of like 40 plus. But I mean, I think for me, part of it was just I was anticipating this game so much from the very first trailer, and I was so in love with it and when I got it and when I started playing it, it was everything that I expected it to be and wanted it to be. So for me personally, I was just like, bring it on. I want more of this. I don't want it to end. I was happy after Orochi and Ninetales when it's like the story's not over yet, because it's like, yeah, bring me more. I don't want to say goodbye to these characters yet. Mm-hmm. And to its credit, that length I feel gets repaid in the ending sequence when you get to see all of these characters that you've met and helped along the way, sending their prayers and thoughts to Ami to make her stronger so that she can fight the Lord of Darkness, Yami. So that was such a great moment, a callback to all of those previous experiences that, to me, even if you feel the game is long, it kind of makes it worth it.
Basically, the moral of the story is Rob Steinman is wrong, and Okami is long and a little intense for being a 40-hour game, but it's awesome and people should play it anyway.
Let's be real, Rob can be wrong about a few things. Sorry, Rob, I love you, but... Yeah.
I love Rob as a friend, but I would be, neglectful of our friendship if I didn't argue with him and disagree with him about a lot of video game topics.
I should say wrong is maybe a strong word. Like, it's an opinion. Everyone has an opinion, and most opinions. I won't say all because some of our president's opinions, yeah. But most opinions, are it's not right or wrong. It's just I agree or I disagree.
Well, okay, all right. Now to use a very crude, popular analogy, opinions are like assholes. Everyone's got one,
and they all stink.
And they're yes, exactly.
And I'm biased because I am the type of player who takes their time and really enjoys just kind of going through a game. So everything takes me a long time.
Me too. Yeah.
For me, especially when it comes to open world games, and Okami is not. I don't think Okami is really part of the open world trend that began with Grand Theft Auto 3 and is still ongoing. But I always have a certain pace with open world games. Like, I'll collect and explore a lot, but then I'll hit a breaking point where it's like, okay, time to stop. Just stop walking through the woods and race to the finish line. And I don't think that really happened to me with Okami because it's not exactly an open world game with the modern connotation of what that is. But when I had gotten through Kamui, I was ready for the game to end, and I remember thinking it was a long game and long for the kind of game it is. But I mean, what are you supposed to cut? It's not. I don't think it's too long. It's just a richly detailed game.
Yeah.
let's change topics a little bit. Okami did not have a troubled development history necessarily, but there's some drama around its development that I think is worth talking about. Now, Capcom had this in-house studio called Clover that made a couple games. They made Beautiful Joe, God Hand, and Okami. And Clover was headed by Hideki Kamiya and a few other influential Capcom directors and executives. And Kamiya was one of the architects of Resident Evil, along with Shinji Mikami, and was sort of the main guy behind Beautiful Joe and Devil May Cry and a few other games. And he was I believe the creative lead on Okami. But shortly after Okami came out, Capcom shut down Clover Studios, citing that Okami and God Hand both had sales that were too low. That ended with a sort of a rift between Kamiya and Capcom proper, which I may be over dramatizing. I hope I'm not. And he ended up founding a company called Platinum Games, which has made several games over the years. Kamiya doesn't work on every single Platinum title. Like he didn't work on Nier Automata, for example. But his baby within Platinum Games has been Bayonetta, which is sort of his, probably his successor to Devil May Cry's brand of over-the-top action, I would guess. Mm-hmm. But anyway, Okami did have a sequel with Okami Den, with Chibi Yami, and a lot of very cute infant versions of the Brush Gods. I haven't played Okami Den, but it was well received, but not as popular as Okami proper. And the word on the street is the reason Capcom hasn't done a major big budget follow-up to Okami is because they don't want to do that without some of the original staff present. They don't want to do it, and because it could be interpreted as a slap in the face to Kamiya and the other people from Clover Studios, which is unfortunate, I think. But it's but I mean that's not Capcom going the respectful route for this is not necessarily the worst choice. So Hilary, I'm not asking you to comment on that entire saga that I just gave an abridged version of, but do you think Okami there is enough juice and enough enthusiasm for an Okami 2 if it had the level of budget and attention to detail as the first game, or would you not want to see one without Kamiya? Or sort of what's your feelings on a totally hypothetical, theoretical, unconfirmed Okami 2?
All right, well, I mean, it's actually probably going to be pretty short because I think if enough of the original team could get involved and if everything worked out the right way, then yes, I'd love to see more in that world. I'm a little bit hesitant just because I think Okami stands so well on its own, but I would at least be curious and I'd be way excited about the artistic portion of it.
All right, and Caitlin, basically same question, potential Okami 2, any commentary on the Kamiya versus Capcom saga, or Clover or Platinum in general?
Well, so first I do find it kind of, it's an interesting development because, shutting the studio down because of poor sales, and yet how many times have we ported this game to different platforms?
Yeah. Capcom doesn't want to make Okami 2, but they are overjoyed to keep porting it to every new system that can support it.
Yeah, and I mean, clearly it did well enough in previous incarnations, or they expected to do well enough that they devoted the resources to have it ported, and particularly with this last one, to have it ported to two architectures that it wasn't originally designed for, to have it on Xbox and PC. Not necessarily that it's super hard, but like this was originally a Sony-only game, and now they expended resources to have, or rather, outsourced
Sony
it.
and Wii.
Sony and Wii.
But your point still stands. It's not like they're only putting it on the next PlayStation. They've branched out on the different system architectures.
Yeah. So I mean, like that's just kind of interesting, and it's a little bit of them shooting themselves in the foot, I guess, closing down a studio that clearly does good stuff. Okami has obviously been well received enough now over the past 10 years to get those re-releases and remasters. And, as far as what Kamiya and Platinum Games have been doing, I mean, people go bonkers over Bayonetta. So it's like, And I guess I appreciate the fact that they wouldn't want to proceed without Kami at present, without the original team. That's nice. It's nice to see that kind of, I guess like you can call it sort of loyalty to the original vision, to not just say, well, we just want to make money on a sequel, so we're just going to do it without you, and it will probably not be as good, because sometimes you can't really replace the original vision. We've seen that in games where directorship changed over mid-game, like my beloved Final Fantasy XII. But yeah, I think my opinion kind of echoes Hilary's. If they could get enough of the original team back, and depending on the direction they take it, there is an opening at the end of the game for a sequel, because you have Ami and you have Waka, flying off to heaven basically, and he himself even says, this is not it. We have a lot left to do. So there's an opening there, but I also agree again with Hilary that the original is just so. It's so much the complete package. I'd be worried about that, sequel syndrome, where it's good. I'm sure whatever they would make would be good, but would it be as good? Would it capture the same feeling as the original? That's always the risk. And yeah, if we could have the original team, I would feel better about it, versus just like, hey, here's more Okami. Don't care who made it. Just take it.
I'm of two minds about it. I might be warmer on the idea of an Okami 2 more so than either of you, but I'm looking at a different case of a high-profile creator at Capcom leaving, and then subsequent sequels happening with Keiji Inafune and Mega Man. Inafune had been at first an artist with Capcom in the 80s, and then one of the architects of Mega Man, and then he sort of was Mr. Mega Man through the entire 90s and 2000s. And after Mega Man had 9 and 10 come out, which were sort of NES-style retro games, he left Capcom shortly after Mega Man 10 completed, and eventually had his own Mega Man-like project, Mighty Number 9, not be received terribly well. And now, in 2018, Mega Man 11 is planned to come out without Keiji Inafune later this year. They haven't given it a hard date yet, and I wonder why they're willing to do that with Mega Man and not with any of the old Clover properties like Beautiful Joe or Okami. And I think it has to do with, first, time, since it's been 8 years, and that's a while. And second, I was reading some stuff about Mega Man 11's development, and basically it was younger and less proven people within Capcom talking about bringing it back for years and pitching Mega Man 11 ideas to executives for years, multiple times, before finally cracking through and getting Capcom and getting sort of, the support they needed to make the game. And I think Okami 2 may or may not happen, but if it does, it probably won't have Kamiya. It'll be new people who have been thinking about making a new Okami for probably more than a decade. I would bet against it, probably. But I think that on Okami 2, the door's not totally shut on it, especially if the Okami HD recent remakes were successfare So, we've been very effusive in our praise of Okami throughout this whole episode. I mean, all three of us love this game and are, part of the throng that has been very enthusiastic of it over the years. But I know that there's some flaws we could talk about. So I guess, Caitlin, you might be the most enthusiastic fan person on the site for Okami. Is there any part of the game that you think is a real check mark against it?
Well, the single worst thing, in my opinion, would be the camera controls on console. Sure.
I mean, 3D action games in the 2000s, do any of them have good cameras? I don't even know.
Well, this one certainly doesn't. It is floaty. It's all over the place. It's hard to position it the way you want it to. And this is particularly an issue with a game where you have to have the camera pointed in a particular direction in order to do brush techniques. The ones that tend to be the most annoying is when you're trying to use Vine to connect Ami to a flower. and you have to have both the flower and Ami in the frame so that you can touch both of them. And sometimes, depending on where the flower is and where Amaterasu is and the camera's particular hatred of you at the moment, it can be really hard to get them both in frame. And it's just, it's not that it's horrible. It functions and it works, but it is way more floaty than it probably should be. And luckily on now we have a PC version. It's a lot easier to control the camera on PC. But then you have to sort of, for me personally, have to deal with my brushstrokes not looking nice. So it's kind of like I chose the awful camera over having my brushstrokes look like crap, and that's how much I care about the brushstrokes in the game.
Ugly brushstrokes that no one else will ever see are, the most tragic part of this game.
Yeah. Well, there's always that one opportunity in the Moon Cave when you have to make your mask and you can do whatever you want. You can just go bonkers there and make something absolutely horrifying. Like I tried to draw Cosmos when I was doing it for stream.
Oh boy.
People asked for Cosmos, and I think you could squint and kind of see it, but it also just looked like some sort of, weird ass monster. So, and that's not necessarily a camera issue. It's just, it is what it is. But, the camera. The other major issue is that sometimes text speed and progressing through text for a game that has as much dialogue as it does, it would have been nice to have a way to speed up text. You can, of course, skip through the movement to the very end and then keep going. But even that can get kind of tedious. And it doesn't work for certain major cutscenes. There are some cutscenes where you cannot speed the text or skip ahead. And that can be a little frustrating. So, little things that can be kind of annoying since they don't really tarnish the full experience. But, there's no game I've ever played that is 100% perfect. And Okami is, of course, also not perfect, even though it's really good.
Right on. So, Hilary, do you remember any nagging issues with the game that frustrated you? Or you think, again, if you were writing a review in the column in the cons column, anything you can think of that might appear?
I know of one that comes up frequently, but one that actually I like, and that's the scrambled sounds, like the dialogue sounds. Actually, when characters are speaking, I know there are lots of people that think those are annoying.
I think that's charming.
Yeah, I do too.
The weird, goofy, mumbled language.
I do too. I think it sort of enhances the idea that this is some sort of, epic tale somewhere that's being told, and you can almost kind of see someone like doing voices for all these different characters. But I don't know. It seems like it's come up repeatedly, so I figured it was worth mentioning.
That's fair. We hadn't brought up the mumble speech in the game, so I'm glad that we at least addressed it.
Yeah. Although you can turn it off, so
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah.
Well,
but
that's no fun.
I think considering how much dialogue there is and how many characters there are, and we all know that voice acting, while there's a lot of great voice acting jobs out there, there's also a lot of shitty voice acting jobs out there. I'm grateful that they didn't do actual voice acting over this. I think it could have been really bad.
It's an interesting compromise between full voice acting and no voice acting for this text. To have it, the kind of speech going through. But I thought it was charming, and also, goes to the occasionally obvious and occasionally subtle sense of humor that the game has with different characters' actions and dialogue. 'Cause this is secretly a very funny script. And if anything, I think the mumble speech makes it funnier.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah, me too.
I think that may do it for episode 123 of Retro Encounter. We have been talking about Okami for an hour, and it is a super good game that anyone with, that likes the Zelda formula or Japanese folklore or action games in general, or a lot of the games that RPG fan likes, you should owe it to yourself to try this game out. Since it's been released 6 times on different systems, it's kind of hard to avoid by this point, I would say. And again...
Yes, you can't run away from it now. It's basically on any system that you might possibly own.
And at the time of recording, Caitlin, you've been playing this on Twitch. You have a review of the PS4 version that you posted on the site at the end of 2017. We've mentioned that there's at least 2 versions of the Okami soundtrack, or arrangements of the Okami soundtrack, that we have in the RPG fan music section. If you're interested in some Okami-related content, RPG fan is not a bad place to look. But looking ahead a little bit, we have still a second episode of Valkyrie Profile, which is our February Retro Encounter Game of the Month, ahead of us. And Hilary, you were on I don't think you've recorded the second episode yet, but you were on the first episode earlier this month, right?
Yep, that's right.
Very cool. And that is a game I have never played and seriously thought about joining that episode, but in the end I made the decision to play Zelda and Monster Hunter instead. Let's see, and I guess we can mention this now. In March, Retro Encounters game is Planescape Torment. I don't know a ton about this game, so I hope I'm not getting any of these details wrong. It is a game made in the Infinity Engine in 1999. It's a Western-made RPG from, I think it's Black Isle Studios that did that, the people that made Fallout 2 and a lot of other classic Western RPGs of around that time. And Chris Avallone, who is a very respected writer of games of that genre, was one of the main writers of Planescape Torment. And it's based in a D&D inspired universe that I know nothing about, called Planescape. And the game is a cult classic, and I know a few people on RPG fan staff are very excited to talk about that. So in March, please look forward to 2 episodes on Planescape Torment, in addition to Valkyrie Profile Part 2 immediately after this episode. So, thank you, listeners, for listening to us for this hour plus, and thank you, Caitlin and Hilary, for joining me on this special Year of the Dog Okami Appreciation Station. Listeners, if you want to get in touch with us, the best way to do so is to email retro@rpgfan.com. You can comment on the rpgfan.com Facebook page, or on the rpgfan.com message board, or find us on Twitter @rpgfancom. And if you want to send us a review that helps the podcast be more visible and reach more people, please do so on iTunes, Google Play, or wherever you can review the podcast that you're getting. So, starting with you, Hilary, if listeners want to reach out to you, what is the best way for them to do so?
I am EP Fire on the boards, and again, as usual, happy to discuss Okami.
And Caitlin, same question to you.
I am Leon Cazzaro on the boards. I'm also Leon_Cazzaro on Twitter. Twitter more than the boards. I'm kind of a lurker these days on the boards. So, but yeah, either one works.
Right on. And I neglected to mention this earlier. RPG Fan also has a Slack channel. Oh, wait, okay, whoops.
No.
I was looking at my toolbar and said the wrong thing. RPG Fan has a Discord channel that a lot of people have been getting into recently. There's a lot of chatting going on there. I think it may be invite only, so if you can't log on easily to the RPG Fan Discord, just hop on the boards and ask to be invited, and it will happen without a problem. Our forum moderator Greg is also runs the Discord. And personally, if you want to reach me directly, I am @TheRealMonsoon on Twitter. I am Monsoon on the RPG Fan boards, and I have a second Twitter just for my weird stuff called @EvokerForDogs. I guess that's appropriate for the Year of the Dog episode. I didn't even think of that.
Yeah.
Even though that is referring to a specific dog that we did discuss on our Dogs of RPGs episode last year.
Koto-chan!
He's a very good boy.
He's such a good boy.
And I said this on the podcast last year, but I love it when he gets a critical hit or kills an enemy or something, and Yukari or Junpei says, "Oh, Koro-chan, good boy." It's like, yeah, you are a good boy. That was an excellent critical hit. All right, listeners, thank you. Good night, and good luck.